Welcome to the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast, where we share real-life experiences for successful Caribbean property entrepreneurs. Learn about their successes, challenges, and strategies to help you create your plan for financial freedom. Now let's get started.
Welcome to episode 14 of the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast. Today, it's our honor to have our first guest from the beautiful Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, land of what they call the greatest show on earth, TNT, Carnival, Roti, and Doubles. Welcome to Richard Small, an electrical engineer, entrepreneur, as well as a property developer. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
You are our first guest from TNT. And Richard, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay. My name is Richard Small. I'm a practicing and consulting electrical and computer engineer. I've been in practice going on about 33 years now. I'm married. I have no kids. I've spent the majority portion of my adult life living overseas in practice. I've been back in Trinidad and Tobago full-time 7 years now, and I run a small consulting company, as I mentioned before, in addition to dabbling in property development.
Well, I mean, that's a nice segue, if there's ever one. Why don't you tell us, Richard, about your first property project?
Funnily enough, my first property project came about due to the death of my father. Okay, so what he did is that he bequeathed me the family home. I'm the youngest of the kids, but he thought I was the most responsible. And he bequeathed me the family home with the responsibility of taking care of my mother and an older sister who was not well. Okay, and when he passed away, we weren't the richest people on the planet. I just finished university, and I thought it necessary, first and foremost, to make an investment to upgrade the property to provide, for most importantly, security for my mother and sister. So I would have, undertaken that as my very first project to do a significant upgrade and refurbishment of the family home, okay, for the comfort of my mother and sister.
Certainly an important reason to get into property, as a first experience. And I guess in actuality, it's quite common for us to be kind of forced into, upgrading property, securing property for family reasons. So how was that experience for you, Richard?
As a young person, it came with its challenges. I just graduated from university. Okay, I didn't have a lot of funds. It was inexperience to a significant degree, but it was also innovation to a significant degree as well. And I've always been an innovative person in my approach to doing things. I think the biggest challenge I had was with procuring the right people, contractors, that is, trades, to perform the work, as well as equally being so young. I was just 21 years old, dealing with some people much older than myself and negotiating with them, to what would be a fair price to provide a quality of service. Okay, because what would have happened is that they would have thought, he's young, he doesn't know anything, and they would have attempted to hoodwink me, and I would have had the challenge of standing up to them, okay, and demanding what I wanted, designing what I wanted, supervising to make sure I got exactly what I wanted.
Okay, and since then, as your kind of first experience, I know a lot more has happened, and that's what I'm even more excited to discuss. So after you upgraded the family home for security and for improved livability, what's your next property project?
So my next property project was actually undertaken while I was living and working in Barbados. So I would have been relocated with my employers to Barbados. I lived there for almost 10 years. And 5 to 6 years into the time that I was there, I decided that rather than pay rent, I wanted to buy. And that was the time just pre the cricket tournament, okay, World Cup cricket. So property prices were spiraling, in fact. So what I chose to do is that I chose to find a piece of property that I could remodel and refurbish. So I made an investment into like a small flat, a small a bungalow type house there, and that would have been my next project. Working with the various trades, okay, to again gut and then to refinish the interiors, exteriors, and the landscaping and so on. I did that, and was that is where my passion started, okay, because I saw where it is that for some sweat equity and for some good management of trade, I could actually significantly improve in real estate investment. So having done that, in parallel, I made another investment here in Trinidad and Tobago, okay, in what I consider to be a good opportunity for the corporate rental market. So it was a pretty much older house, but it was owned by the general manager of a company called Shell back in the day in the 60s when Shell was operating in Trinidad and Tobago. And so I made an investment in that property. And likewise, again, it was a gut down literally to the bare walls and a complete refinish, okay, to make it a pretty much high end in what was and still is a very high end upscale area. Okay, so with that, I got the bug. And I've done several more of that, buying older properties, remodeling, refurbishing, and upselling. Okay, but then again, I decided to go a step further. And a step further I've gone into is significant property development for two reasons. One, the original family home that I spoke about, a while back, okay, in my introduction, that suffered complete loss and destruction due to a fire. And so instead of refurbishing it a second time, it was in a pretty large lot of land. And my plan for my own future in terms of retirement was to use it as a source of retirement income. So what I did is that rather than rebuild, okay, using like what was left from the fire, concrete house, I decided to tear it to the ground, and I went off and I built, a block of luxury townhouses, a block of four luxury townhouses. And that too would have been a significant investment. I still am owing on the investment, but at that point in time, 20 odd years later, I would have had a lot of experience with regards to not just engineering management, project management, and practice, but also financial modeling. So I would have spent some time and effort, like doing the models for that activity to make sure that even though I'm still owing on it, and it's 10 years now, okay, is the income on it easily covers the mortgage as well as the maintenance of the property, as well as leaves a little bit left over. And with that, by coincidence, I met someone and we decided to replicate that model, but rather than do so using the traditional brick and mortar, we looked at getting into a new technology investment model using something called light steel. And that's where I've done quite a bit to this point.
Okay, Richard. So quite a lot happening here, and I always like to make sure our viewers and listeners don't get left in the dust. So let's go back to the property that you renovated in Barbados and the property that you renovated in Trinidad before you did the family rebuild. Each of those properties were buy, renovate, and rent back or sell.
So in the instance of Barbados, it was buy, renovate, and live in, because I was paying rent and a significant proportion of my income went towards rent, which was no return value to myself. So I had the financial capital to do a complete refurbishment, but instead what I chose to do is move into the house and do the refurbishment gradually over a period of time. And what I did with the excess funds, me working and living in Barbados and making Bajan currency instead of TT currency, is that I exported that to Trinidad and Tobago, and that's where it is I bought, like the decrepit, it was really decrepit corporate rental. Okay, and that's where I gutted that literally back to the concrete shell, the walls and floors, and I would have, remodeled that to where it is today.
Two points. I've been speaking about it for a while to my family members and my friends, those living abroad, the UK as well as the US. It's very difficult and challenging to wrap your head around the concept of working in a metropolitan state or metropolis, and not wanting to put roots down there. Working there, renting, taking that money that you earn and developing a property back in your home country where the dollar is, 40 cents, the value of the dollar is 40 cents, or 2.5 times, for example, if you're doing the conversion. Um, it is something that I modeled. So, for example, I have a friend, and the only affordable house in their area, and that's out in the outskirts of London, is about £450,000, Richard. So I did a model. I told him for £350,000, you can build a fourplex in St. Lucia or maybe in Trinidad. That building, based on where it is, where we thought of, will actually pay the mortgage, pay your rent in London that you are now, as well as leave money in your pocket. So that model is always available, but it's difficult and challenging for persons to think of doing that, especially if they don't see themselves coming back home to live. But the idea that some property off island where you are, off the mainland, can actually earn and pay your rent and appreciate in capital gains every year. It's something that I want to recommend anybody who has the opportunity to look into. So, and that's exactly what you did. You were earning in Barbados, but you were investing back in Trinidad because of the preferential or the beneficial exchange rate. So that's an
Correct.
awesome point then to pivot into the next point. So now you have this manager's residence that you stripped down and renovated. Why did you choose to rent it as opposed to selling it, flipping it?
Well, I now work for myself. Okay, my company is 18 years old. In fact, my company was in existence while I was living and working in Barbados. So you can literally say I had two jobs. I worked on a full-time job in a company that and then I also had a consulting engineering practice in Trinidad and Tobago. So it was always, to your point, my intent to move out to Trinidad and Tobago full-time. One. Two, okay, be that as it may, okay, there was always the risk of working and living and owning a small company, okay, in a market that is very dynamic. So I wanted to look beyond just the income of being a company owner, and I wanted to diversify my portfolio. And having cash in the bank, which is practically getting negative interest, was not of any benefit to me. So I saw the next best investment was to make real estate investment. So that's where it is. I looked at it as being a real estate investment to give me returns, increase my equity, increase my value, as opposed to a flip. So I would have told you, I could tell you, for example, back in the day, this was done maybe 15 years ago. Okay, back in the day, I would have paid the equivalent of about 100,000 US dollars for that house. I would have probably put in another 100,000 US dollars into it. Okay, and the market value for easily 2 to 3 times that at the present time. Okay, so it was foresight, looking at modeling, just to your point, looking at making a risky but a calculated risky decision. Okay, make this investment and not just look to flip it, but make this investment for the long term, and I'm seeing the appreciable gains as a result of it.
So tell me about Trinidad and Tobago and that particular area. How did you go about agreeing or deciding what you do on the inside in terms of number of bedrooms, bathrooms, in terms of the decor, and your eventual asking price for your rent? What was the rationale there?
So it would have been informed by the many years I lived in the United States. Okay, and while living in the United States, one of the things I spent a lot of time doing was watching the TV remodeling shows. So whereas people would watch, like drama, and comedy and whatever the case might be, my spare time I spent doing two things: watching news, okay, and watching TV and remodeling, and always getting ideas. And it was while in the US as well, there was the whole advent of the internet. Okay, so that allowed me an opportunity, to spend a lot of time using Google and tools even before Google, okay, to look at ways and means of improving and modeling property and real estate. So I myself learned in that regard, okay, I would have learned a lot. And having essentially made that investment into that property, okay, I decided that I wanted to put an American look, touch, and flavor to it, because that is essentially the clientele that one looks at in Trinidad and Tobago for corporate rental market. So having gutted it down just to the bare shell, as I said, okay, I looked at the quality of tiles, the quality of wood, okay, the quality of windows, the patio layout, enclosed garage, covered garage, okay, so you name it, landscaping and surfacing of the yard. So you name it, I looked at all that was possible. Okay, and within my budget, I made, what I thought was the best selection to put that all together, to make it look and feel how it is today. All right, and having done that, again, sorry to digress, but so the second property, for example, I would have done the block of townhouses. In that instance, I went a step further. But all the furnishings and fittings that went into that, and some of it was leftover and residual to the corporate rental. I would have actually flown to the United States. I would have packed a 40-foot container. I would have shipped to the Trinidad to be able to do that. So that's where I get most of my appetite from, and that's where it is I'm seeing I'm getting most of the demand from. Except until recent times, the market is a little bit depressed. Okay, that in putting those medium to high end finishings with the American or first world taste, not so much American but first world, it is a very attractive proposition to potential customers in Trinidad and Tobago in the real estate market, those who are operating at the middle, upper middle, and high income categories.
I'm here thinking that, okay, so you did a major change. Up until then, you had done renovation for improvement. Now you're doing of single units, but now you're doing multifamily. Tell us the key differences in the approach, in the design, and some of the challenges that you'd have had with the multifamily versus the single unit construction.
So the biggest challenge I would have had in multifamily was the investment cost. Okay, and I would have made an investment which is literally I had to stretch myself to the limit just to get like the startup like investment for that activity. And living and working in Barbados as I was at the time, okay, and trying to do a project in Trinidad and Tobago added challenges, which was it was difficult to find a bank willing to actually give me a loan or a mortgage to support that property. Again, it's probably beneficial that along the way, along my professional career, I spent some time doing an MBA. So I understood the finances, the concept of finances, I understood the language of the bank. So what I ended up doing was that same said property that I mentioned to the corporate rental. I ended up using that as collateral, okay, to get the kind of funds to undertake the project that was the fourplex. Again, the fourplex was built, like with two models that was very well detailed, and very well calculated. Whoa, sorry. First of them being a rental model. So should I choose to rent and can keep them indefinitely, that the rent would have covered the mortgage, okay, to pay off for the property. The second one was a sale model. Okay, so I calculated down to almost the last detail what was the kind of returns if I were to sell 1 unit, okay, 2 units, 3 units, and all 4. And along that continuum, what would have been the break even point? And my break even analysis back then was that 2 units sold would have actually paid off for all 4. I simply made the decision not to go off and sell the lot. I still have it today. Okay, so the biggest issue again was being a young professional, okay, like I'm having this interest in the area of construction, not being a certified construction civil engineer myself or owning a construction company, having some funds, living overseas, all of those were challenges, going and sitting with a bank, okay, and trying to say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, okay, I think I have a good idea, I have a lot of experience, but outside of this particular area. I've done things before, but on a small scale. I want to buy to know or play in a league instead of being like the third division. I want to move to the second division now. Would you work with me to do so? And that was one of the issues that I had to overcome. Having done that, okay, again, based on just the happenstance of my career, I worked alongside some pretty good engineers across the spectrum, mechanical, civil, whatever the case might be. So I was able to engage the services of a civil engineer who I had a good and long-standing relationship with. And I established, which was a kind of novel even for him, a very detailed contract. I would have done the designs myself. I would have engaged the architect and draft people to do the layout plans and everything else the case might be. And it was a very comprehensive document to hold him to a fixed price. And so said, so done. Okay, he was able to do the construction, okay, at the fixed price agreed to. So I didn't have to manage or deal with, like variations, and price increases and so on. And beyond that, as I said, the furnishings I held to myself. I would have made provisions in that model to go to the US. I took my wife with me, okay, to get the feminine touch to things. We went into the major chains across there. We picked what we wanted. We packed a 40-foot truck container, and we had it shipped back to Trinidad and Tobago, as I said, to do the finishings and so on as the case might
So Richard, you said that after looking at the financial model, you decided not to sell. You keep all for cash flow. Um, the model that I have implemented, I think it's unique, and I'm open to hearing from anyone who would um, use it. My model is do multifamily, um, but I build, I sell, I rent, and I hold. Um, I build multiple, I sell enough just to cover the mortgage, and I keep the rest cash flowing, unencumbered,
That would be
and
my
do the
ideal
process
place.
again.
That would be my ideal place. I applaud you for that because that's the ideal place. And in fact, I may throw a point in there. You may have heard me speak about this many moons ago. I know we interacted a few times. I know many of our friends in common, I would have had this conversation with. Okay, entrepreneurs like yourself, okay, that can we spread across the Caribbean. I think that model, okay, can actually be built upon, okay, in a very significant way. And what is that significant way? To consider doing real estate investment trusts, or REITs as it's called, which is a standard thing again in North America, right? So having the model, okay, you may not have the capital, to actually do it all in a grand scale or spread across the Caribbean. But I'm thinking, like there's an opportunity, for guys like you, like me, and others, okay, of same mind, to get together to form essentially a single company, register it, however, in all the different islands and so on. Okay, put in some investment capital according to the REIT model, okay, and have a couple of cookie cutter designs. You may have a design, somebody else may have a design, I have one. We can mix and match as the case might be because different markets might have slight differences in their interest, okay, or different markets might have differences in the cost and so on as the case might be. But to have some standard designs of those multifamily models, okay, and to attempt to build them across the length and breadth of the English speaking Caribbean where it is that the investors come from. So I understand what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, you're ahead of me in the game. I applaud you for that. It was exactly the place I wanted to be. And I'm thinking I'm not too far from it right now. Okay, because I've at the same time had to deal with the challenges of managing a full-time engineering consulting business. But the blend of the two has allowed me to be in a much more comfortable place financially than I would have been otherwise.
Richard, you touch a point, and I know that's the disadvantage of having the audio podcast only. The listeners, when driving to work, when you guys on the train, you're not seeing the reactions of the guest or the host. I raised my hand when you said read, because just our last episode 11, we spoke about that. And once I discovered the REIT in Jamaica and the Carlton Savannah and in Trinidad, my mind just became, wide open, because that is actually the path for scalability in property development for
Correct.
us. There is
Correct.
the one caveat is that in the Eastern Caribbean, the ECCB, real estate is the exclusion in the collective investing scheme. However, we've had conversation, and the more we get into this podcast, the more people that we meet, the wider we spread the network. I think ultimately that will happen in the Eastern Caribbean, the REIT. Certainly for scalability and for growing, that is the next step. Richard, I want you to take us to the big guns, the large scale model that you're developing right now, especially the model that considers the new materials, and the model that will bring greater economies of scale. I think this is something people outside of Jamaica and Trinidad, in the small islands in the Caribbean, would be keen to hear about, to understand the benefits of it and what's really happening in that space.
Okay, thank you for that question, that request. I believe I'm sitting on right now the wave of the future with regards to housing construction methods. All across the Caribbean, we traditionally build houses of two types: wooden frame structures and brick and mortar. There's this perception in many a market when one builds a wooden frame house, okay, that's a low income house. And the cost of brick and mortar, whereas that has been used, like in low income houses, and people build incrementally. They block up one room, they cover it, they do an extension, and so on as the case might be. The cost of brick and mortar has been increasing such that it's become unaffordable. In addition to that there's a big issue, probably equally significant issue, which is the quality of workmanship and the reliability of labor. Okay, so whereas the cost of materials can essentially be pinned down, you have the variability of the quality of workmanship, where it is many times you have to break down a wall because it's been improperly built, it's bent, or you have to buy extra cement, in order to smooth out the surface, and so on. In this case might be the flatness of the floor. You also have the issue of the productivity of workers, particularly so, I think, here in Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, so the cost of labor, the cost of a laborer has gone up exponentially. Okay, and if it is that we get 3 to 4 hours of productive time out of them on a given day, we get a lot. And the owner is expected, most times where he does have a mortgage, to have it built within a certain period of time. Okay, and that tends to be not the case. There tends to be cost overruns around labor simply because of the quality of workmanship as well as the productivity. So having had some experience with all of those challenges in the projects that I did, okay, I by coincidence met this fine gentleman, and he was sitting on a piece of technology that he himself was not able to exploit for about 5 to 6 years before I met him. And when I saw it, I bothered again, me being Mr. Google, as some people tend to call me, to research it intensively and extensively. Okay, and what I thought, and as I said, how I started this piece was, it is the wave of the future. And what is it? It is light steel housing construction. What is light steel housing construction? In layman's terms, if you look, everyone would have seen television at some point how American family or Americans build houses. They build houses using wooden frame. Okay, light steel is, instead of using wooden frame, you're using rectangular hollow section to do the said same thing. In Trinidad, in Jamaica, there are some bigger companies, multinationals at that, like multi-Caribbean at least, who are attempting to do light steel. Okay, but what they're doing is that they're actually using C-section, as opposed to what I just mentioned a second ago, hollow section. Okay, and the C-section is now coming into its own for the American market. It's been established to some degree in Australia. Okay, and they're now using their might and their marketing power, to put it on the ground in the Caribbean. But I'm saying that, like the technology I've been working with this gentleman on, using rectangular hollow section as the frame of the house, is far superior, for very, very little difference in price, than the C-section. So having done that, and having met this guy and seen the technology, he in fact had a demo house of his own purchased when he entered into an arrangement with the manufacturers that he did not build. And my first effort was to work with him, to have that 2-bedroom, 1,800 square foot house built in Tobago. And it was a labor of love, essentially, nights and weekends. I would fly to Tobago on weekends. He had a full-time job himself. He would go to the site at late evenings into the night and do certain things. And over a period of 5 months, nights and weekends, we completed this house. That alone, was stellar from the point of view that, like the estimates that we had, if it is that we had to build a similar house of size using brick and mortar, it was going to take 9 to 10 months as a standard. So remember what I said, nights and weekends. So we were able to build this house complete to move-in condition, nights and weekends, over 5 months. You can imagine what the cost savings would have been compared to traditional brick and mortar of 8 months, just labor cost alone for 3 months. And having had it built, I encouraged him. We approached one of the banks, local banks. They had, an open day. And everybody who came, and saw the house, were completely blown away. They were swearing that, this was a house that came from Pembroke Pines, or one of these upscale developments in the Florida area, and so on. So with that now is because I caught his bug, and I looked at, if it can be done, in Tobago on this kit, in this time frame, I need to understand the transfer of technology. So I encouraged him. I got him to agree. We went to the manufacturer at their plant. Me being an engineer, I asked, a million questions. I walked around the plant and I realized quite easily what they've done can be copied and replaced and on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's my vision at this point, to get to that point. But I don't have the initial capital on my own to actually build a factory. So what I did, was I Again, worked with a guy, and the same structure that I would have built, which was the fourplex, to replace my burnt out family home at one location, I used the exact set drawings. And I worked with him, and we built another fourplex in another part of Trinidad and Tobago, the middle of the island, using that light steel technology. Again, one, to present a product that people could look, touch, and feel. Okay, and two, for my own self, okay, not to do the economic comparison and so on as the case might be. We were able to do the framing, the steel framing for that house, 60 for that building, as I said, a fourplex. Each fourplex unit being 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. Total covered space, almost 8,000 square feet, plus roof, the framing in 3 weeks. From foundation to the frame of the building completed, 6 men, okay, it was literally putting together a jigsaw puzzle in 3 weeks. And we were able to finish the first unit, okay, in literally under 6-7 months. Again, it was something that was flabbergasting to most the neighbors to begin with, okay, as well as to builders in the area and so on, to see something of this size and scale going up so quickly, okay. And so we've had a challenge in terms of one of the initial investors that decided to pull out. So it's come to a pause, but not without like the physical structure being completed. One unit, the showroom unit, being completed, and the other units being in various stages of construction. We are working through the legalese with regards to this one investor before finishing off the rest. But it did represent, in terms of our total construction, okay, on almost 25 to 30% reduction in equivalent cost had we gone ahead and done so using brick and mortar. And furthermore, okay, with that, because I worked with him, we made an approach to the national authority in Trinidad and Tobago responsible for building houses for the market, national. Okay, it's called the Housing Development Corporation, HGC. And they brought some of their senior people in. They had a look, okay, and they're again practically blown away. And out of that, they had a distress project of their own, where it is that they had the foundations built, almost 100 or so foundations for another site, and they asked us if it is we'd come in and build and complete that design for them. We got the designs, we spoke to the manufacturer, okay, we started bringing the materials in, okay, and as of right now as we speak, okay, we're just going through the final approvals for the last 3 or 4 houses. So we would have turned over, like that batch of houses, for the HT in Trinidad and Tobago. They've actually started giving it as well, okay, to their applicants who are looking for starter homes and homes of that nature. And all the reports that we have at this point in time is that everybody's just blown away. They're thinking like, hey, we have again built, like a Pembroke Pines type of development for the government. Okay, and remember, the government, is not looking high end. The government is looking for affordable homes. So we've given the affordable homes market a flip, so to speak, in terms of the quality of finish at an affordable price in a reasonable time, okay, which again, everybody's still talking about as we speak. And along that continuum, it's taken us about 2.5 years to get to this point with that project. Okay, I've started slowly to implement elements of bringing the technology, transferring the technology to Trinidad and Tobago. So whereas it was just a concept at the point in terms of when I went to the factory and saw what needed to be done, okay, we've started on our own to actually build frames, cut metal, okay, and screw up trusses, screw up walls. We have quite a lot of the assembly aspect of it. We now have, in hand and quite a bit of experience with. So the next stage to move on to is to actually have the plant and machinery, which is not that much, truly, okay, to essentially machine cut rectangular hollow section in bulk, okay, as well as there's some requirements. There's a patented or out of patent now piece, okay, to have that built in production. It's called a web element, okay, which gives structural integrity to the frame. So we're looking at acquiring those as we speak, and we've also trained some young engineers out of the local university, West Indies here, in doing the modeling and the use of the software, so that you could walk in all these streets now and say, hey, I have this design in my mind, or I have this design on paper. I've done it in AutoCAD, like I would have wanted to do a brick and mortar home with it. Okay, we can now take that, transpose that into showing you visually the frame and the final finish of what it would look like using light steel, and then go a step beyond that now to do the actual calculations as to what the estimated cost would be. The biggest savings in cost in using that model, okay, would again be time, okay, because what we're looking at now is that we can easily turn around all the materials being available, foundation already being prepared. We can do the preparation of foundation separately, but start to finish, we can build, okay, a 1,200 square foot, 1,500 square foot home, okay, in just under 3 months, move-in condition, hand over keys. And the manufacturer still tells us, that's an overrun, okay, because for them, using the same number of men, it should be done in about 30 to 45 days. So we are going to have to continue to look at that as more projects come on stream, how to optimize ourselves, how to improve the quality of productivity, level of productivity, sorry, not quality, but level and quality of productivity of our workmanship, to get to those numbers, because again, every day there's an overrun, is an additional cost, okay, not so much to the buyer, but to us as the people who are providing technology. And if it is, we can reduce that cost, we can improve our margins, as the case might be.
Richard, in terms of just the metrics here, in the Eastern Caribbean, building traditional brick and mortar is just under 100 US dollars a square foot. And that's good quality middle class. In St. Vincent, maybe Dominica, it's maybe 50 US, just a little more. That's price per square foot. That's one question I want you to answer. Compare that to Trinidad. And secondly, in terms of affordable housing, again, in the Windward Islands, affordable housing is under 150,000 EC, which is about 55, 60,000 US. So two things. Tell me what's the average building cost, traditional brick and mortar, and of course the savings from using new technology. And two, what is the threshold for affordable housing in Trinidad and Tobago?
The government has now increased the threshold for, well, I wouldn't say there's a threshold per se, there's a quasi threshold. And the quasi threshold is based on the mortgage rates that you can get. So at the present, if it is that you were to build a house less than or equal to 800,000 TT dollars, which is about 115,000 US dollars, okay, you practically get somewhere between 0 and 2% interest. So I would use that as the metric to say what an affordable house is and costs in Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, so not so much the square footage, is the amount to spend, and the threshold figure in TD dollars is 800,000. The rate of exchange is roughly 7 to 1, so that's why I said about $110,000, $115,000 as the case might be. Building costs in Trinidad and Tobago at the present time, okay, for brick and mortar, it starts at $450 a square foot. Again, that's TT. So you were to convert that to US, you're talking about $65 US per square foot. So it's a whole lot cheaper than building costs in the Eastern Caribbean. But then granted, we have factories here that make bricks, factories here, we have, you have quarry space as well, sand being not a problem. And we have the one of the many cement manufacturing plants in Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, the average building cost, however, because most people tend to stretch themselves, okay, and try to build in the upper middle income range. You're looking at, like something that could go as much as $1,000 a square foot. Okay, all depends on the final finishings and so on as the case might be as well. Okay, at $1,000 TT dollars a square foot, you're looking at $150, $160 US per square foot equivalent. For our technology, okay, the most important thing is the shell. Okay, and why I say the most important thing is the shell, okay, is that once the shell has been put up, okay, what makes it affordable a living home or high-end living home are the finishes. Simple as that. So we can get low-end, like cement board and gypsum board, and essentially clad the inside and outside respectively, okay, and paint it, okay, and that could be it for an affordable income. Or what we've done, and which we did with the HDC project as well, the Housing Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, is that we chose to use fine high-end, okay, metal cladding, okay, cladding surfaces on the outside, okay, as well as like in the ceilings and the roofing and so on as the case might be, not to mention fixtures and finishes and so on. And even so, having done that, for what is described as affordable living, okay, like our price that we came in at was roughly, okay, about $55 a square foot, which is essentially a $10 US per square foot, okay, with the high-end finishes, okay, and that's complete. If it is that you have to look at, just the metal frame alone, the metal frame alone can come in maybe to another 20% cheaper than that, as the case might be. So from a factory perspective, okay, what I'll be looking at, what my concept is, if I can find the right partners, investors, and markets, okay, is to focus on the frame. Okay, and in focusing on the frame, if the government wants it, you can buy the frame in quantity and you can put the low-end finishes. Okay, if it is that somebody wants to build a luxury villa, okay, like 5,000 square feet, you can get the frame as well. You choose your finishes, have it look like marble stone on the outside, okay, like all the other various finishes and so on. Okay, and all the fittings as goes with it. So the variability in our case, okay, is actually in the siding. Okay, the finishes to the exterior and to the interior, as opposed to the actual form structure itself of the frame. And form structure of the frame, as I mentioned, okay, like importing everything as we speak, okay, is already about 15 to 20% cheaper than brick and mortar. And we want to move away from importation of cut and finished. We want to buy the raw material lengths of 20-foot RHS, okay, and cut it and finish it and machine it ourselves. We thinking we can bring that cost down even further.
So, Richard, you're wearing two hats now. Your journey has been, one that you can describe as nothing short of phenomenal. You actually went deeper, deeper, deeper down the rabbit hole. Now you're actually in production and actual construction, but not just traditional, new technology. I want you to split those two roles. Tell me, it's a synopsis of, as a private property developer and the journey from single family to multifamily, what has been the biggest challenge that you had so far? And then we're going to go to the commercial part. But as a private property developer, what's been your biggest
The
challenge?
biggest challenge, the biggest challenge as we go up the pyramid would be cash flow. Okay, and we'll be finding financial institutions, who have faith and trust in innovation and new technology. Okay, both I think are being equally debilitating. So there are some people, okay, you show them the numbers, unless they had a look, touch, and feel, and even when they had a look, touch, and feel, they're not convinced because they believe, okay, that the market, okay, or they themselves have a view that only brick and mortar has a future in the industry. Sorry. The second one with regards to cash flow is just that. Okay, so having taken on this much larger project, okay, and this project ran into several million US dollars equivalent actually. Okay, it wasn't funds, that like myself and my investor partner, would have had. So we had to go basically do the roadshow with all the major banks. Most of them turned us down. Okay, and it was an independent finance house that in fact stood up for us, okay, and are still with us to get us to this point. Okay, and funnily enough, having made that journey, now on the back end of it, we see the banks that are coming in and saying, you guys are interested now? Can we have a conversation? Okay, because they're not driving by. This particular development is a set of these many houses. Is in a very public place, like is open to the public. Okay, like is some along a main course, people are seeing the final finishings. So many people from the banking system who would have been aware of us or who we would have contacted are now coming and saying, are you interested? Can we work with you and so on? We have many private developers who previously looked at brick and mortar now coming to us and saying, hey, okay, do you want to work with us and so on, the case might be. Right, but there's still, as I said, that cash flow issue to be managed, okay, from the perspective of, okay, how this is financed is a little bit different to how traditional financing could be done, because the bulk of the work is done at the factory in constructing and assembling the frame, okay, aside and apart from the foundation on site. So even before the first brick is laid, okay, in the traditional method, we would have had the house finished because we build the walls, we build the trusses, we build the stairs, we build the floors off-site, okay, and they're simply put into the back of a truck and roll to the site. We use either manual labor or maybe a small jib crane, okay, to erect them in place. Okay, as opposed to the traditional methods, which again the bank looks at and for, okay, is that you buy incremental amount of bricks and you do a room, okay, you buy cement and you do a beam and so on and so on. So that cash flow model, I think that it needs to be trained, okay, needs to have the market educated by and about, okay, in terms of us as the developer. If we have to take on the project, okay, we have to basically make sure that we have the funds we need as we need it to do the majority of construction, majority of fabrication, if you want to call it that. That's the better word to use. Fabrication off-site, okay, the product is taken to site, it is erected in place, and that's where the final finishing is going, as the case might be. And that three-part sequence is what, in fact, makes it such that we are able to build the houses much faster than the traditional brick and mortar method. And I should mention while saying that, okay, again, at the factory, okay, which is essentially a cutting steel and an assembly point a place, the last of the houses that we did, which was entirely done locally, in terms of fabrication for the Housing Development Corporation, we were building these 1,200 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom houses, start to finish at the factory with 4 men in 5 days.
Richard, when I look at the new technology, in St. Lucia, we have a supplier who has introduced a model house. And they're actually in the process of promoting this new concept. What was the initial feedback when you introduced it in Trinidad and Tobago? And what are some of the potential disadvantages, if you could say that about your product, or differences or difference in perception of potential customers when they compare it to brick and mortar, even if it's faster? Any issues of structural integrity in terms of standing up to hurricanes, aesthetic, flexibility? What are some of the responses that or objections that you have to deal with from the introduction of this new technology?
Brilliant question. I love the question. So first thing first, okay, as I said, I'm being a practicing consulting engineer for 18 years now. Okay, and in as much as my area of specialty by training was electrical engineering, I've done the gamut of it. So likewise, when I met this gentleman, with this technology, and I decided to pursue it further. I did 2 things at the outset. I found and I established a relationship with the original patent designer. He's deceased now, Scotsman, lived in Canada, and I literally called him blindly on the phone, okay, and told him I was interested and wanted to learn from him and ask him questions, and I got the full spiel from him. Secondly, we being in the Caribbean, okay, I made sure to investigate what were the building codes, where they exist, okay, or what the proposed building standards, where they do exist, for the Caribbean. And by extension, okay, I would have understood that houses are typically supposed to be built. I use the word supposed to withstand Category 4 or greater hurricanes and magnitude 7 or more earthquakes. And guess what? This gentleman had built that into his patent. So he gave me a copy of his patent and all the calculations and all the tables. I still have that in my possession. And furthermore, okay, when he was actually taking this from concept to fruition, he worked with an organization in Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade County in Florida is one of the most rigorous organizations in the world when it comes to building codes and standards. And he got it approved there to building codes and to those building codes and standards. So, and he also provided me with those building codes and standards approval. So having a patent in one instance, having his building codes and standards approvals in the other instance, both from himself. Okay, and working on this project, the fourplex that I would have done, which was my showcase project, I took all 3 into the Ministry of Works in Trinidad and Tobago, more specifically to the Chief Design Engineer. And we made an application to him to get the approval of this housing construction method. And we were able to be successful at that. So we do have in our possession that document, technical document that says they would have, done the rigor and testing and separate audit of the calculations of the patent of the materials, okay, and they are in agreement, okay, at least on paper, that a design would typically stand up to the magnitude 7 earthquake and Category 4 up to 4.5 hurricane. So that put a lot of comfort in the minds of speaking with technical people. So there are many technical people who've come and said, hey, I'm an engineer, I'm a professional, I'm an accountant, the case might be, okay, I'm looking to build my dream home and so on, I want to consider you guys technology. So once we present that bit of information to them, 9 times out of 10 they're sold. For those who want to look, touch, and feel, as I said, we have several instances of no longer demonstration units, but actual units on the ground. Okay, they would go and they would actually look, touch, poke, and feel. The one thing that I could tell you, I'll be very frank, transparent, and honest on that part, is that there's a perception across the Caribbean, no different to Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, and that it's difficult to cross the barrier with, which is the difference in the two technologies. You slap the wall of a concrete building, you get a sound. Okay, I can't replicate the sound verbally, but you know the sound you get when you slap a concrete wall.
Like a slap, like a
When you
tap,
slap
tap.
right. When you slap the wall of light steel, there is a space between the inner and outer cladding. The inner cladding would be, as I said, gypsum or some other material. The outer cladding is typically concrete board, but other materials on the outside of that even, siding and so on. There is a hollow sound.
A
Okay,
more
and
hollow
there
sound,
has
yes.
been, huh?
A more hollow sound, yes.
Yes. And there has, because in that space between the inner and the outer, that's where we run mechanical, electrical, plumbing as well. Okay, we also provide insulation, and the insulation is both for heat, okay, as well as for sound. All right, so, but there's a space notwithstanding. So if it is that you were to tap the wall, you'd hear that space, and in the perception and the minds of some, because there's that hollow space, it doesn't sound as being structurally intact as concrete.
Yes.
There's a flip side, however, and I've been able to convert some on that flip side. And what is that flip side? Is that me personally, again, spending a significant proportion, in fact, more than most of my adult life in North America, living there before moving to Barbados, as I mentioned. Okay, one of the things that I did not like as a child, and I hated as I became a developer, was to see plumbing and sewage pipes to the outside of buildings, which we do across the Caribbean as a norm. Like, to me, it's hideous. And if it is that you look at housing in North America and in the first world, that is not the case. You don't see any signs of plumbing whatsoever. So this interstitial space in light steel does allow for fitting all the drain pipes, all the sewage pipes, all the electrical pipes and everything else within the walls without having to burst concrete. Okay, and can be easily accessible because you just remove a gypsum panel or a section thereof if it is that you have to go and do repairs. So some of the people who are the concern about the hollowness of sound, this pushed them over the edge to our side, to come over to the dark side, figuratively speaking. Okay, that they too didn't like the look of plumbing to the exterior of a house and so on. Okay, they understood the value of that being in that space. Okay, and they also became some converts as well. So as I said, in short, okay, the turnaround, okay, and the convincing factor for that I have attempted to promote. Okay, maybe I've done a poor job marketing. Okay, and there are other things to market as well, not just on price. Okay, but has been the case of the technology does stand up according to the regional building codes where they exist, or standards where they don't exist, or norms where they don't exist. And likewise, as I said, being able to demonstrate that that space in that wall, okay, does allow for a better, a more aesthetic product, at least in my view, that you don't have, where exactly somebody's toilet is, where you know where it is, their drain sink is, and so on, because you have on the inside, where some people tend to put electric cables against the surface of the wall. It's all run in that inner space, and it's an attractiveness both outside and inside to the home.
Wow. And just for the benefit of our listeners, you may have seen that across the Caribbean, and it's all because of access. The reason why you put the pipes on the outside is if there's a clogging in one of the pipe, in one of the drains, or you have a leak, or you have a burst, you have a fracture. It's on the outside, you go, you fix it. But it certainly leaves a lot to be desired for aesthetic appeal. So, Richard, our final question
Correct.
to you, and you determine which angle you want to take this from. Anyone listening here, a private person or someone who wants to delve into entrepreneurship, what advice you have for our viewers and listeners on property?
Just yesterday, speaking to a 20-something-year-old, okay, who calls himself, or who aspires, he's at university still, he aspires to be an entrepreneur. I'm in my 50s now, okay, and I've been an entrepreneur since I've been 20 years old. I've had several startup businesses. I've failed a couple of times. Okay, my most recent one, as I said, my consulting engineering firm is 18 years old. It's grown strength to strength. We're held in high esteem by both local customers and international suppliers. So it demonstrates that I would have done at least something right with regards to my entrepreneurship to where I am today. I work for myself. I choose not to work for anybody else. The thing that got me to this point, okay, I think more than anything else, was passion. Okay, because I would have built my company, for example, while having a full-time job. Again, similar reasons. Bank unwilling to add a vision for the company. It's a technology-based company. Okay, consulting engineering, we provide technologies to a number of industries. And when I went to the bank and said, I have these technologies, they're cutting edge technologies, they're first world technologies, there are companies in Trinidad and Tobago and across the Caribbean who would have demand for this. Nobody wanted to finance me as far as that's concerned. I hired staff, I sent staff overseas to get training, okay, and certification and so on. And for several years, I paid that staff out of my pocket. I had a full-time job in the telecoms industry, as you know, and I would take portion of my salary and do all these investment projects related to construction. And I would also take my salary, a portion of it, and send it to Trinidad and Tobago to pay staff. And why? Because I believed in myself. I had a passion for what I did. Okay, and whereas there were detractors, and sometimes even my own spouse was a detractor. I decided, I'm the little train that could. Okay, I decided I'm the little train that could. Okay, and I'm not going to stop. Okay, and I got to the point I'm today. For the many young people, and there have been many that have attempted to mentor, they saw what I was doing, they had a similar interest, they would come to me, they would ask for advice and whatever so the case might be. Okay, I would have attempted to help several. And what I saw is that when the going got tough, they got going. Okay, so not many of them, and I would say maybe 20 to 25 over the last 20 years, not many of them entities or the interests or the idea that they started with, okay, that's actually gone anywhere. Simply because a tough spot came in their lives, a tough spot came in the business, a tough spot came in some kind of challenge in the market, okay, and they didn't have the passion, they didn't have the drive, and they decided to give up. I can tell you, I've had many tough spots. I've had instances of companies much larger than mine going to my multinational partners and so on and saying, why are you doing business with a small outfit in Trinidad and Tobago? Okay, I'm a billionaire company. I'm a conglomerate in the region. Take away the agency and give it to these guys. Okay, and I have to respect several of them for making a point. I've lost some, but there are others who said, Richard and his company has done always everything that we've asked them to do. They've met their metrics, so there's no reason to thank you, but no thank you. Okay, and likewise, I've had instances, even till today, okay, where it is that, you've had some people, okay, they don't have the certification, they don't have the representation agreement, they don't have the training that my guys do, but they try to undermine us with our customers. And there are some customers who are not loyal to us as much as we've been loyal to them, okay, and because, for $5 more, they've gone another way, as the case might be. So as I said, if I have to give advice to entrepreneurs, okay, anybody who wants to become an entrepreneur, you must have the belly, the drive, the passion, okay, obviously you have to think on your feet. You must be willing to adapt as well, okay, and have faith in yourself and faith in the man above. And if it is that you have that basket in the right mix, okay, you shall succeed.
Wow. Well, Richard, I feel inspired already. Yet again, another really fulfilling and informative episode. The little train that could, that little phrase, really stuck out, for me. And even though the advice you gave was not necessarily specific to property or limited to property only, I can certainly attest that in property, these are the same fundamental principles that you must employ for you to be successful, because no property project has gone according to plan that I have ever been involved in, nor as either as an employee in a full-time job or in your personal projects. So you've been listening to another and viewing another episode of the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast. We want to thank you for the time that you spend with us. We want to thank you for all the support across all platforms. Remember to share, help others join the conversation yourself. Remember, as I always say, everyone needs somewhere to live. Until next time, see you.
I love my community. It teaches you the importance of being together even through difficult times. Business owners doing their best to make it through. Fishermen and farmers working hard to put food on our tables. Nurses caring for the sick shows me who we are made of. People who care. I guess it's about growing together.
Congratulations and thank you for tuning in to the Caribbean's first property investing podcast. We want to help Caribbean people create wealth and achieve financial freedom through property investing. Our show provides general advice based on personal experiences and is for educational purposes only. For more information, resources, and past episodes, visit us at CaribbeanPropertyInvesting.com. Remember to click the subscribe button so you never miss a show. Let's go.